The morning began with a strange silence, heavy and almost suffocating. It felt as if the entire world had stopped to witness the exact moment when Marina's life would begin to collapse without warning. The sun, timid behind gray clouds, passed through the cracks of the curtains in her small apartment and illuminated the living room with a dull glow, as if even the light itself was tired. Marina sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold coffee. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the feeling that this day carried an irreversible change. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her mind. For months, she had felt a growing distance in her relationship with Andre, her partner of 5 years. It wasn't just the coldness in his gestures or the way he avoided looking her in the eyes. It was something deeper, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. A disturbing intuition had lodged itself in her chest like a splinter she couldn't pull out. Andre had always been loving, attentive, present, and suddenly he had become a man of short answers, late nights, and poorly explained excuses. Marina tried to justify everything: fatigue, work, the normal tensions of a long relationship, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. On that specific morning, Andre's phone vibrated on the coffee table. He was in the shower. She never touched his phone. She believed trust was the foundation of any love, but the insistent vibration caught her attention. "Message from Carolina," the notification said. Marina froze. Carolina was a co-worker of Andre, a beautiful, intelligent woman, often praised by him. Marina felt her stomach twist, but she took a deep breath and didn't touch the phone. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't become that person. But the silence in the apartment felt increasingly heavy, as if the walls were whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. When Andre came out of the shower, drying his hair, she watched him carefully. He looked away nervously when he saw the phone still lit up on the table. He grabbed it too quickly, locked the screen, turned his back, and in that small gesture, the truth began to reveal itself. "Are you going to work today?" Marina asked, pretending to be casual. "I have an important meeting," he replied, emotionless. Marina simply nodded. When the door closed behind him, the apartment became silent again, but now it wasn't a neutral silence. It was accusatory, uncomfortable, almost cruel. Marina stood up slowly and walked toward the window. She watched Andre go down the stairs, get into the car, and drive off before even fastening his seatbelt. He always fastened it before starting the car, always. Her heart tightened. Something inside Marina, mixture of courage and pain, awoke at that instant. She felt she needed to discover what was happening, because the emptiness inside her had become unbearable. Not just because of jealousy, but because her intuition screamed that there was much more behind Andre's distance. Something he didn't want her to know. And on that cold, silent morning, filled with invisible omens, Marina's life began to slowly unravel, pulling threads she never imagined were tied to so many lies. What she would discover in the next hours would change everything. Absolutely everything. Marina remained standing at the window even after Andre's car disappeared at the end of the street. The steam from the forgotten cup of cold coffee still rose faintly from the tabola. Perfect metaphor for how her life now felt. Lukewarm, abandoned, losing its warmth little by little. She took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotions that threatened to overflow. She was never the type to create stories in her head. She wasn't jealous or naturally suspicious. But the change in Andre was not only noticeably, it was glaring. Something in him had broken. Or perhaps something in him had been given to someone else. And she needed to know. Not because she wanted to spy, but because she needed to protect herself. Marina grabbed her purse almost without realizing it, as if a silent force were guiding her. She locked the door behind her and walked down the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. Her heart raced, not from anger, but from fear of the truth. She got into the car but didn't start the engine immediately. Her reflection in the rearview mirror startled her. Tired eyes, tense expression. She no longer looked like the light-hearted woman who once believed love was above all. Finally, she took a deep breath and drove off. She didn't know exactly where she was going until she remembered the message. Carolina. The street of Andrea's office was just a few minutes away. Marina had no intention of confronting anyone. She only wanted to observe, understand, see with her own eyes. Sometimes, the truth appears when we least expect it. Traffic was slow, as if the world insisted on delaying the inevitable discovery. When she finally arrived at the building, she parked across the street. She watched people go in and out, some rushed, others carefree, and then she saw him. Andre got out of the car with his phone in hand, but he didn't look late. He looked anxious. He looked around, as if waiting for someone. Marina felt her heart climb into her throat. After a few minutes, Carolina appeared. She was not dressed like someone going to an ordinary meeting. Loose hair, discreet makeup, but done just enough to seem like she had gotten ready more than usual. She carried a folder of documents, but the way she looked at Andre wasn't professional. It was intimate, complicit. They exchanged a greeting that was too quick for coworkers, and too long for mere acquaintances. They didn't hug, they didn't touch, but sometimes the silence between two people says more than any physical contact. Marina felt her world tilt, but she stayed still. She watched every detail, as if watching her own life collapse in slow motion. When they entered the building together, Andre held the door so Carolina could pass, a simple gesture, yet full of meaning. A gesture that once belonged to Marina. Her chest tightened. She leaned her head against the steering wheel and closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply breathed, trying to stop the pain from overflowing. Her body felt numb, as if reality hadn't fully settled in yet. But it did. When she opened her eyes again, she saw her reflection once more, and an unknown strength began to emerge. Not vengeance, not fierce anger. Something deeper. The need to find herself again, to understand where she had lost herself, and more importantly, why she had allowed someone to slowly extinguish the warmth of her life. Marina started the car and drove away, but she didn't go home. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to find them. The next step would change not only her relationship, but her entire identity. Marina drove aimlessly for a few minutes, trying to sort out the storm raging inside her. The steering wheel seemed to slip between her fingers, not from sweat, but from the weakness spreading through her body. Her heart pounded so hard it echoed through the car. She needed to breathe, think, decide, but everything around her looked blurred, as if reality were wrapped in an emotional fog she couldn't escape. Then her phone vibrated on the passenger seat. It was on Andre. It was Renata, her best friend since school. Marina hesitated for a second. She didn't want to fall apart. She didn't want to talk to anyone, not in that state. But Renata was the only person who always saw what Marina tried to hide from the world, and sometimes even from herself. She answered. "Hi," she said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Marina, what happened? Your voice sounds strange," Renata immediately asked. Marina swallowed hard and bit her lower lip. She tried to respond, but the silence that escaped through the phone line revealed more than any word. "I'm coming," Renata said, without waiting for permission. Marina hung up and parked on a quiet street near a small cafe she used to frequent. She went inside, ordered a glass of water, and sat at the most distant table where no one would notice her tearful eyes. A few minutes later, Renata rushed in. She looked around until she found Marina. When she approached, she didn't need explanations. She sat beside her, not in front of her. And that alone made Marina collapse inside. "I saw it, Rack," Marina whispered, voice trembling. "I saw him arriving at work with her. The way they look at each other, the way he's changed with me. Everything makes sense now." Renata closed her eyes, breathing deeply, as if choosing her words carefully not to hurt even more. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. I'm sure, Marina answered instantly. I've felt this for weeks. And today I saw it. And it hurts. It hurts in a way I've never felt before. The tears finally came, silent. They weren't loud or desperate tears. They were the tears of someone whose heart had been broken with surgical precision. Renata squeezed her hand. Marina, there's something I've been holding back. Something I didn't know if I should tell you, but now I think you need to know. Marina looked up, confused and frightened. What do you mean? Renata took a deep breath, prepared to drop a bomb that would change everything. For weeks, I noticed something strange in his behavior. She began slowly. Andre mentioned, to a mutual friend, that he was unsure about the future, that maybe he was involved with someone at work. Marina felt all the air leave her lungs. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, hurt. Because I wasn't sure, Renata replied, her eyes also filling with tears. I didn't want to hurt you for no reason. But seeing what you witnessed today, Marina, I think things are even worse than they seem. The ground seemed to open beneath Marina's feet. It wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just a look. It was something deeper. Something that had been going on for a long time, and she'd trapped in love, and hope had refused to see it. You think he's Marina tried to say, but her throat closed. Yes, Renata replied, with painful sincerity. I think he's cheating on you. And I think this didn't start recently. Marina's world collapsed. But paradoxically, for the first time in a long while, something inside her awakened. The need to face the truth, no matter how painful. Renata squeezed her hand tightly. You're not alone, she said firmly. And now, it's time for the complete truth to come out. Marina slowly wiped her face. The first truth had been revealed. But the worst and most liberating were still to come. The conversation with Renata opened a wound Marina had been trying to hide from herself for months. Now that the truth had begun to take shape, she could no longer pretend everything was fine. Each step she took felt unbearably heavy. Each breath felt like it scraped the inside of her chest, as if it were filled with thorns. They stayed in the cafe a little longer, but Marina no longer heard the sounds around Hertha conversations. The cutlery, the footsteps, everything seemed distant, muffled, as if she were isolated inside her own pain. Rack, Marina whispered, voice breaking. What if I'm the last to know? What if everyone already knows about them, except me? Renata didn't respond immediately, and her silence was answer enough. Marina then realized the betrayal was not only emotional, it was social. It was humiliating. The world around her looked at her with pity, while Andre lived a second life behind her back. From that moment on, something inside her began to transform. It was not strength yet. It was despair. Marina decided she needed proof. Not just for herself, but because she needed to confront Andre with something concrete. Something he couldn't deny. She needed to look at herself in the mirror afterward and know that, when everything ended, she would have no doubts. The next morning, she woke up with swollen eyes and a clouded mind. Andre had already left a habit that had become routine in recent weeks. She had breakfast alone, staring at the empty chair in front of her, and felt a pain so deep it felt physical. She grabbed her purse and left. She didn't know exactly what she would do, but she knew where to begin. She went to Andrea's workplace again, but this time she waited farther away, at a spot on the street where she couldn't easily be seen. She watched the building's movement like someone looking for tiny cracks in an old wall, and they were there. Soon, she saw Andre step outside for a break. He wasn't alone. He was with Carolina. The two walked to a nearby restaurant. Marina followed at a safe distance, her heart pounding violently against her chest. It felt as if at any moment her body would collapse, but her mind insisted, "You need to see. You need to know." Andre opened the door for Carolina to enter, and she smiled at him in a way Marina had never seen, a smile that was intimate, confident, almost proprietary. They sat side by side, not across from each other, too close, too comfortable. Marina watched from the sidewalk, trying to hold back tears. The pain was so enormous, it was numbing. When Andrei placed his hand over Carolina's, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath Marina's feet. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. That was the final confirmation. The living proof. The final blow that destroyed any remaining hope. Marina quickly walked away, with trembling steps, before anyone could notice her presence. She wandered aimlessly through the streets, along sidewalks, through memories of what had once been her emotional home. Every memory now felt poisoned. When she returned home, she tossed her bag onto the sofa and collapsed onto the floor, unable to stand. She cried like she had never cried before, a cry from a torn soul, a shattered heart. A cry that came from the depths of everything she once believed in, and that was now in ruins. Hours passed without her noticing. When she finally managed to breathe again, her mind was consumed not only by suffering, but by a crushing certainty Andrei was living another life. And she had merely been the background. And then came the most irreversible consequence of all. The love she once felt for him, the strong, dedicated, patient love, began to break. Not by choice, but by survival. Because sometimes the pain is so great that even the heart understands it cannot keep loving what destroys it. And in that moment, Marina realized that the woman she once was slowly dying. A new one would be born. But before that, she would have to face the final confrontation that would change everything. Marina spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling, trapped in thoughts that seemed to scream inside her. The clock read 3:47 a.m. when she finally accepted she would not be able to sleep. How could someone sleep, knowing their home had been a stage of lies? How rest while the chest feels like it's burning inside? She stood up slowly, feeling as if she carried years of weight on her back. She walked through the dark house, observing every detail. The photo of her with Andrei on the shelf, the books they chose together, the blanket they shared during Sunday movies. Everything seemed fake now, adulterated memories. In the silence of dawn, Marina made a decision. She would no longer run from the truth. She would not hide. It was time to face Andrei and herself. When the sun began to rise, she took a long shower, put on simple clothes, and tied her hair. Not to impress, not to appear strong, but to feel clean before the truth, as if preparing for a closure ritual. At 8 a.m., she heard the door open. Andrei entered quickly, almost nervously. He had his phone in his hand, as usual. Marina's heart pounded, but she remained seated at the table, head held high. He noticed. "Marina, you're awake?" he asked, adjusting his tone, trying to sound natural. She didn't answer. She just looked at him, a calm look. So calm that it would terrify anyone who knew they'd done something wrong. Andrei swallowed. "Did something happen?" he asked again. Marina inhaled deeply. "Something did happen," she said. "I finally saw clearly." His forehead furrowed. "See, what?" "You and Carolina at the restaurant yesterday," she said, steady. Andrei's face instantly lost color. For a moment, he tried to keep control, but his wavering eyes betrayed him. "Marina, it's not what you think," he began, walking toward her. "Don't come closer," she said, firm. He stopped. He looked desperate for an excuse, an escape, a justification. But Marina was different now. She was no longer the woman who accepted half-truths, who closed her eyes not to suffer. This was a Marina broken, but lucid. "I saw you caress her hand," she continued. "I saw the way you look at each other, how she smiles at you, how you rush to see your phone when she messages you. I saw everything I needed to." Andrei rubbed his face, nervous. "Marina, I didn't want it to be like this. But I'm confused. I don't know what I feel." Those words felt like a punch. "You don't know what you feel," Marina repeated, with pain and irony. "After 5 years with me, that's what you have to tell me." Andrei lowered his head. things changed. They changed for you, she cut in. Because for me, I was still here, believing, trying, fighting for both of us, while you lived another story behind my back. He took a deep breath. I didn't plan this. No one plans to cheat, she replied. It happens when someone stops respecting who is beside them. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Marina took a folder from the table. Inside were papers she had spent the night organizing, statements, messages she had already seen in passing, notes, dates. She didn't need these for herself, but she needed to show Andre she knew that there was no turning back. I know everything, she said, handing him the folder. Now you need to decide who you are, because for me, that decision is already made. Andre opened the folder, and desperation spread across his face. Marina, please, we can talk about this. Solve this. She interrupted. You destroyed everything we had. There is no us anymore. Her voice faltered, but did not break. Today is the end. Andre took a step toward her, but Marina raised her hand, firm, like never before. I loved you, Andre, truly, but now, I need to love myself more. And for the first time, Andre understood that the woman in front of him was no longer his. The loss was irreversible. And Marina, though shattered, was reborn. When Andre left that morning, the entire house seemed to exhale. The silence that once hurt now felt like relief, a space empty, yes, but finally honest. Marina stood still for a few seconds, staring at the closed door, unable to believe it had truly happened. The hardest decision of her life had been made, and although it hurt, for the first time she felt the pain had a purpose. She sat on the sofa, allowing tears to fall once again. But they were no longer desperate tears. They were tears of release. Tears of someone who, despite having been broken, knew she had chosen herself above all. The days that followed were strange and quiet, as if she were relearning how to exist. The house seemed too big. Her habits seemed scattered, like a shattered routine looking for a way to reorganize. But Marina did not let herself sink. She realized that if she stayed on that sofa reliving the pain, she would be letting Andre continue to control her life even in his absence. So she began rebuilding herself. The first step was to return to the things she had set aside because of him. Morning walks, reopening her old sketchbook stored on the shelf, beginning to rediscover her own identity. In the first days, her lines were shaky, uncertain, as if her hand barely remembered how to express. But little by little, the art began to flow, and with it, her strength. Renata stayed by Marina's side through it all. Her presence kept loneliness from becoming a deep abyss. They talked for hours, laughed at silly things, made plans for the future. You're starting to shine again, Renata said one morning, watching Marina prepare coffee with a lightness she hadn't seen in months. Marina smiled, surprised. I'm trying, and it was true. For the first time in a long time, she was trying for herself, not for anyone else. 1 month passed. A month without Andre, without excuses, without lies, without silent humiliation. Marina didn't know exactly when peace began to return, but she noticed she could breathe again. Her chest no longer burned. Her soul seemed to stitch itself slowly, like a seam made patiently. During a walk in the park, her destiny began to change. She was sitting on the grass, sketching a large tree, when a man approached with a small dog pulling at its leash toward her. Sorry, he said with a smile. I think he likes you. Marina smiled back, genuinely for the first time in a long time. It's fine. He's adorable. The man introduced himself as Raphael. He had a calm manner, polite, with serene eyes. They talked for a few minutes, but something in Raphael's gestures struck Marina. He spoke, looking directly into her eyes, with respect. Different from what she had become used to. They said goodbye naturally, without rush, no expectations. But destiny likes subtleties. A week later, Marina returned to the same park, and the little dog ran to her as if it remembered her. Raphael came right behind, laughing. I think he has a good memory, he joked. This time, they talked more. About life, work, dreams, fears. Raphael had also suffered a heartbreak years earlier, and that created a silent bond not of pain, but of understanding. Their meetings became frequent, not because they planned them, but because they happened naturally. Marina felt fear at first. The love she had offered once had been returned as betrayal. But Raphael never pressured, never demanded, never invaded. He was simply there present, calm, respectful. One afternoon, as they walked at sunset, Raphael gently took her hand, waiting for any sign to let go. Marina took a deep breath, feeling her heart beat fast, but this time, it wasn't pain. It was life. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked, smiling. "For reminding me that there is love that doesn't hurt." Raphael squeezed her hand slightly stronger. "Everyone deserves that kind of love," he said, "including you." And right there, in the middle of the park, with the sun setting and the world seeming to breathe along with her, Marina understood that her pain wasn't the end. It had only been the beginning of her rebuilding. Andre had been the fall, but she herself had been the rebirth. And Raphael, without invading, simply walking beside her, became a new chapter, light, honest, without shadows. Marina finally found a love that chose her for real, but above all, she found herself, and that was the happiest ending possible.